meeting to order, and we'll start off with board announcements.
Actually, if we could, Chair, if we could do a roll call first, that would be terrific. And then
I see that, okay,
Yeah.
sorry about that. Please call the roll. Arlene.
Yes.
Are we supposed to turn these on when we say yes?
Yes, please. Appis.
Here.
Bailey.
Here.
Dearson.
I'm not sure they've got, I don't think they can hear us yet. And your mic, is your mic on?
Dearson.
I think they're calling roll.
Appis.
Here.
Bailey.
Here.
Dearson.
Here.
Blackwell.
Here.
Butt. Kohler.
Here.
Cruz. Glover. Green. Hariff.
Here.
Higgins.
Here.
Benales.
Longmire from Pittsburgh for Benalis.
Lyman.
Here.
McCaskill. McCullough.
Here.
McEntee. Kulik.
Here.
Perkins.
Here.
Russell. Schroeder. Schwartzman. Sears. Toms.
Here.
Tatson.
Here.
Trotter.
Here.
Wagon Connect.
I'm here.
Carlston.
Here.
Withy.
Here.
What, about 9 people in Concord?
Yes.
Okay, now we're going to move to board announcements. Are there any members of the board who would like to make an announcement?
This is Don Tatson from Concord. I don't have an announcement, but I do have a request for future meetings. So I think it's been very good that we assign a lot of responsibilities, particularly to the admin and the technical committees. And we see some of the things that warrant discussion show up at our meetings. I think it would be useful as the board grows, and not everyone's on every committee, that maybe we get a up to 1-page memo about what a committee did at its prior meeting, so we have some sense of what's going on organization-wide.
thank you. That's a great suggestion.
Anybody else from the board like to make an announcement? At some point, we're going to talk about our ribbon cutting yesterday, but maybe we'll wait and let Dawn lead that discussion. Okay, it's now for public open time. Are there any members of the public here who would like to speak? Apparently not. Report from our Chief Executive Officer.
Great, thank you so much. I just wanted to draw your attention to a document that's in front of each of you. This is the annual board survey. This should take just a few minutes, no more than 5 minutes. If y'all are able to fill it out and leave it at the dais, then we can collect them afterwards. These are helpful to staff and will help influence kind of future engagement with you all. And if you aren't able to do it today, you'll get a follow-up email, but hopefully you can just do it today and we'll keep it real simple. And then next, I wanted to let folks know that the staff transition to the Concord office is underway currently. We actually had moving trucks here today, and many of the staff that have been working out of the San Rafael office will be shifting over to the Concord office starting tomorrow, and should be unpacked and up and running by Monday of next week. We have a staff orientation happening first thing Monday morning. And a tour of the new office will be planned within the next few months. For those of you that don't get out there regularly, we want to make sure you get to see it at some point. But things have been going pretty smoothly, with the exception of a few bugs with the internet. So that's been our biggest challenge so far, which I guess is a good thing. It's pretty manageable. And we're hopeful that by May, we will actually host the Concord portion of the board meeting in the new space, which should make our video connection even better, where we're able to see each other even more clearly. So we're really, really excited about that. We'll keep you all posted on that. The next item is I wanted to let folks know that the MCE solar ribbon cutting happened yesterday, and many of you were there to participate. For those of you that weren't, I just wanted to let you know it was a great success. We have a newspaper article circulating here at the Santa Fe location for those of you that might want to take a glance at the Marin IJ. There was also press in the San Francisco Chronicle, and in the Richmond, there was Richmond Press as well. So really exciting to see the level of interest. We had a lot of participation in the event yesterday, including representatives from the California Energy Commission, elected officials, members of the public, and just a wide range of stakeholders. Kate Sears, our chair, was the moderator for the day in the MC. Jonathan Brito, a graduate of the Richmond Build program, was not only one of the speakers, but also had the honor of flipping the switch. We had a kind of a large switch with all the partner logos stuck up on there to show the partnership that created that big project. We also had Contra Costa supervisors, Federal Glover and Supervisor John Joya, both of whom serve on the MCE board, John Joya as an alternate. And they shared encouraging words to all of the attendees, and we're going to show a quick video just so that folks can get a sense of the scale. While we're queuing that up, I just want to say my biggest reaction to the project yesterday was just, I was struck by how enormous it is. It covers 65 acres. The buses taking us there while driving through it because it's so big. So here we go. Last thing I want to say about the event yesterday is that because it was on the refinery, an active refinery site, we had police escorts getting us onto the site. We were all shuttled from the Richmond City Hall via bus to get there. We all do our safety equipment the whole time. So I just want to do a shout out to our public affairs team that did an amazing job coordinating all of the logistics and keeping us all safe. I also wanted to point out that you may have seen in the video these big cement rectangles, and I want to explain what those were. Because this site is a capped landfill, there was a large portion of the site where we weren't able to penetrate the soil, and so we used these large cement ballasts to hold down the panels on the ground. And so on that side of the site, all of the wiring was put into these long conduits of plastic that were just laying on the ground. Typically, when you go to a ground-mounted solar site, you see that type of infrastructure is in the ground. So it was interesting to see this different type of approach. When you're working on an active landfill, you got to use different technology. On the other side of the site, where we were able to penetrate the soil, you didn't see the conduit on the ground, but you saw a tracking device that's used to actually force the panels to track the sun throughout the day. So we have 2 different technologies being used at the site, producing energy. And just to remind everyone of the scale of this project, our feed-in tariff project, our feed-in tariff allows for projects that are up to 1 megawatt in size, like our Cooley Quarry project and our Sanderfell Herbst Airport project. This project is 10.5 megawatts, so it's more than 10 times the size of the smaller ones that we've seen to date, and really exciting project. I think that probably the thing that's getting the most attention is the amount of job creation that came out of it, and the great partnership that we had with Richmond Build to train folks up over a 2-year period before the project even began construction, and make sure that we used a lot of local labor and got folks into green career pathways.
And let me just add on to that, Dawn, before you move on to your next part of your report. It really was an incredible event, and I think a lot of that, the size of the facility is extremely difficult to get a sense of from the ground. So I'm so glad we had the video, but I think a lot of the excitement yesterday really was because so many people who worked on the project were there. And the pride and the excitement, and for all of us, of course, when we started out, right, we had a lot of pressure on us to build local renewable energy facilities, and to have gotten to this point where we have a 10.5 megawatt facility is amazing, and it was also such a great demonstration of where the agency is now, that site is on the East Bay, and it was sort of a really tangible linkage between our beginnings in Marin and now our entry into Contra Costa. It was just a tremendous day. Could have been just a wee bit sunnier, but we didn't mind.
Dawn, this is Eddie Bursan in Concord. We want one, only 25 acres in Richmond. We will do 100 here on the base. But I'm serious, I want one of these. So
Great. Well, Director Butt, would you like to tell the trick to getting a 10 megawatt project in Richmond? The interface with Chevron? Yeah, I think that the partnership with Chevron was really key, that they provided the land to us for $1 a year for a 20-year term. Having the land really helps make it economic, so that was a really big one.
Concord has like, what, a 5,000 acre naval weapons station there.
I was being restrained at only 100 acres. I'm trying to be nice.
So we're counting on Eddie to deliver us a site out there for the
I
next
can deliver
project.
the site, but I really I'm very serious here. I don't know if I talk to Tom or who do I talk to get this thing going?
Yeah, the person to talk to about any local projects is David Potofsky, who's on our procurement team, and I'm happy to connect him with you, Eddie. Thank you for bringing that up.
Hey, Don, this is Scott Perkins. I have a question. Does that have any storage capacity associated with it?
It does not have any storage capacity, but we have been talking to the developers about adding that at some time at a future date. I think that would be a great addition if it can become economic.
Hey, I could put it on top of 112 bunkers that's stored stuff that, goes boom in the dark. I already got the storage space. Okay.
Does it come with the capacitor banks and the batteries?
Yeah. Well, batteries are easy. We'll talk to Duracell.
Yeah, okay.
I like this competitive spirit in Concord.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, more sites. And then the very last thing I have in my report is I just wanted to let folks know that the enrollment, which has been underway throughout the month of April, is going really smoothly. And we've had a lot of events, many events every week in all of our new communities. We've also had events ongoing in our existing communities. And the enrollment process has been going very smoothly. With very few bumps in the road, kind of compared to what we've seen in past enrollments. So really excited about that. If any of the directors in our new communities have questions from constituents or questions just from themselves, please feel free to reach out to our team. Our public affairs team is responding to questions on a regular basis, on an hourly basis. and showing up to lots of events. If there are events in your community that are not yet on our radar, please let us know so that we can be out there talking to people. I was asked to talk a little bit about the enrollment rates, and they've stayed pretty consistent with what we've seen in prior enrollments, with a slightly lower opt-out rate than we've seen at this point in time with other enrollments. There are some things that are different about this enrollment than others, so it's not a true apples-to-apples comparison. But we're hovering between a 7 and 8% opt-out rate, so still very strong participation. We do tend to see another phase of opt-outs after folks start to get their bills, and that's going to happen in the next month or so. Folks are also going to be getting 2 mailers post-enrollment. So they'll be getting a mailer in May and then also in June, letting them know that they were enrolled, and also reminding them how they can opt out or opt up to Deep Green. But again, if folks have questions, please let me know.
Don, this is Dave Trotter in Concord. Can I ask a quick question now?
Yeah, please.
I received an inquiry from a constituent who had solar on his roof and was able to talk him into staying with MCE. One of the things that made it persuasive to him was the fact that PG&E apparently, as of April 1, for his particular solar, did a 10-month true-up. And I was wondering whether he'd have to stay in to get his annual true-up. They did an early true-up. My question is, we didn't know that in February what PG&E was going to do with all these customers in these new communities. Do we have more insight now that they're doing, that PG&E is somehow doing their true-ups to coincide with the cutover just to make this more convenient for MCE, or is this a one-off kind of situation?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I'm glad you raised it because I'm sure it's coming up for other folks as well. So what is happening is when a net energy metering customer switches to MCE service, a true-up is triggered. And so we are advising net energy metering customers to make a decision about whether they want that to happen or don't want that to happen. It is really a personal decision based on when you want your credits to roll over. That if folks decide to stay with MCE, a true-up will happen. And the best person to talk to on our team about that issue is Justin Kudo. He works with a lot of net energy metering customers on a regular basis and he and his team can help provide advice to folks and help them make the decision about when they want the true-up to happen. Because that annual true-up will continue to stay at that date on a regular annual basis. Does that answer your question?
No, it doesn't, but I'm going to follow up with you. I had a broader question, which is, we were saying we didn't know when these true-ups were going to occur earlier, and that people waiting for that true-up should not opt in initially. My experience with this constituent would suggest that maybe that's no longer the case. I don't want to waste anybody's more time about that, but I want to understand that better because we're continuing to get questions and I'm making presentations.
Great. Thank you for the question. I'll follow up with you directly.
Thank you.
John,
Hi,
sorry, go ahead.
this is Pete Longmire, Mayor for the City of Pittsburgh. This is a great time for me to thank J.R. Killigrew and Marcela Vasquez. They've been holding meetings throughout the Pittsburgh community about the new program here, and so they've kind of had a mixed bag of people that have asked some pretty good questions. And just to piggyback off of what Dave was saying, there was two people who had fairly sizable PG&E true-ups, and I just want to commend the MCE staff that was there, jumped right in, volunteered to help those citizens work through the process of either reversing or making the true-ups go away. And so I thought that not only that the team members and the rest of the people there did a great job, but they went above and beyond to help those two customers. One was from Pittsburgh, and the other one came all the way from Oakley just to attend the community meeting about the MCE program. And so I know that there's several more meetings scheduled within the city of Pittsburgh, but I think it was definitely noteworthy to express my appreciation for the team coming out.
Great. Yeah, Denise?
I was just wondering if we could, because it's hard to see who's talking, and I'm sure it's the same for the people over in Concord, that maybe when we talk, because we say what our names are, if they could just raise their hand so we can see who actually is speaking, and maybe get to know each other over the airwaves there.
Great idea, Denise. Thank you. John, do you have more in your report?
I just wanted to let folks know that the Pittsburgh call center is fully functional now. We have 11 staff members working at that call center, and there's room for about 11 more. So there's likely to be some additional hiring over the next 6 months to a year. We've had staff doing site visits there over the last couple of weeks, and we'll be planning a board field trip or open house or something like that so that folks can go and visit it. You may recall we worked with Future Build in helping to train folks in the Pittsburgh community to work in that call center, and currently we have several employees from Pittsburgh and also Antioch that are working in that call center and helping customers that have questions about MCE. So it's a very exciting outcome.
Trip to the CAISO on Monday.
Yeah, great idea. So there was a meeting this Monday of this week at the California Independent System Operator, also known as CAISO, and this is the entity that manages the grid for the state of California. They held a meeting at the request of CalCCA, which is the California Community Choice Association. So many of the CCAs, besides MCE, were able to participate for a day-long meeting where we learned about what CAISO is up to and also educated CAISO on what the CCAs are up to. As many of you may know, we interfaced with CAISO directly to handle the grid, the power that we schedule onto the grid, and we deal with them for financial settlements on a monthly basis for both the scheduling of our load and our generation. And our interface with CAISO is really important, and they are, I think, they are eager to interface more with the CCA community. So I felt like it was a really useful dialogue, especially for the newer CCAs.
And I'll just add on to that, this was my first trip to the CAISO, and I encourage everyone, if you have an opportunity, if you haven't gone, it's just an extraordinary experience to see the control center and the big wall of charts and graphs and all sorts of colors and movement as you watch the energy moving around the state of California. It was absolutely fascinating, and I really appreciated the number of staff from CAISO who engaged with us. It was extremely informative, I think, going in both directions. So,
Where is that facility located?
in Folsom. And we had the full benefit of a hailstorm coming back on Monday evening. It was really quite amazing, but yeah.
And if you happen to make it over to the ISO, please feel free to stop by because our offices are immediately
Yeah.
next door to theirs, so.
That's right, we
You're
should have come
always
to
welcome.
visit. Thanks, Kirby. Super. Okay, anything else, Don, we've forgotten? All right. Any other questions for Don?
Yeah, how can we get a tour of that place?
We have held board field trips in the past, but we haven't had one in a couple of years, so maybe the time is right. We'll start looking into that.
That's a great idea. Yeah, it's really fun. I think I might go again.
All right.
Yeah. All right, any other questions for Don? Buddy? All right. So next on our agenda, item 4 is our consent calendar. There's 2 items, approval of the March 15 meeting minutes and approved contracts update. Any comments, questions from anybody on consent? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion. Brad? I have a second. All in favor? Aye.
We need some
Aye.
abstentions.
And who wants to abstain?
Dave Trotter from Moraga. I was not there. I want to abstain on the minutes.
Anyone
Rich
else?
Carlson, Walnut Creek. I wasn't able to attend last time.
Okay.
This is Kevin Harold from the city of Larkspur. I need to abstain as well.
Okay.
David Kulik.
Pete Longmire from the city of Pittsburgh.
David Kulik from
Great, super. And Barbara? All right, now don't everybody abstain. All right. Are we good? on
I wasn't there.
All right, did we capture everybody? I think so. All right, very good. So next on our agenda, item 5 is the proposed amendment to MCE policy on investment policy. David, are you kicking us off on this? Excellent. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is David McNeil. I'm the finance manager at MCE, and I'm pleased to present an amendment to MCE's investment policy. MCE's investment policy was approved by your board in April of 2016. Its purpose is to govern cash and the management of cash at the agency. We included in this policy is the imperative of maintaining, first of all, the safety, secondarily, the liquidity, and in third order of importance, the return on investment on MCE's cash. At the present time, authorized investments include essentially investment of cash in bank, holding of cash in bank accounts, and at the LAIF, which is the beg your pardon, Local Agency Investment Fund, which is managed by the State Treasurer of California. The amendment to the policy would expand the range of investments that MCE is allowed to invest in to include U.S. government securities. It would also expand our ability to invest in certificates of deposit to include a term of up to 5 years, provided these certificates of deposit are insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. The reason for the amendment to the policy it primarily relates to the approval of the last budget, which is going to increase substantially MCE's cash balances, and we'll have, by the end of the year, we estimate approximately $60 million in cash that we'll be able to invest in or have an opportunity to invest in government securities, and to increase MCE's return on investment without substantially increasing our risk. So the substance of the majority of the amendments that you see to this policy have to do with the procedures that will govern these types of investments. That I'll happily take questions.
Great, thank you, David. Any questions for or comments for David?
Yes, Scott Perkins in Concord. I noticed you don't include commercial paper AAA rated. Was there a reason why you don't?
They're not specifically commercial paper AAA rated. There are a variety of instruments that municipal agencies such as ourselves can invest in. I purposely kept it simple by just expanding it to a much more narrow range. And we can certainly consider expanding it to additional types of securities in the future if we feel like that will increase returns in a cost-effective and prudent fashion.
I'd recommend we look at that. I know our own city and a number of others that allow for our cash balance that we allow for AAA rated commercial paper, and it does improve our rate of return without substantially adjusting our risk.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Scott. Any other questions or comments for David?
Yeah, I have a question. Pete Longmire, City of Pittsburgh, right here. Will we be investing in any firearms?
Absolutely not.
No.
Okay, very good.
Katie.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
David, does this require one motion or two? Because there's both a policy and a resolution.
So the heads of our financial managers.
Yeah, I think that, to be prudent, we should take 2 votes and do them separately with a roll call vote.
All right, I'll move that we approve the proposed amended MCE policy 014, the investment policy.
Second. Great, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, that's approved. You want to go on to the
I
next
will
one?
move that we approve the proposed resolution, or maybe adopt would be the better verb, 2018-05, authorizing investment of monies in the local agency investment fund.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, that's also approved. Thank you, David.
Point of clarification, though, my understanding, this is Dave Trotter in Concord. My understanding of that resolution is it authorizes withdrawal of money. I don't know if we're already at LAIF, but we might want to be rebalancing, and so I was assuming it was, as stated, not just to deposit, but also to withdraw.
David, would you turn on your microphone and also address the question?
It's,
Thank you.
well, let me say, with respect to the resolution itself, that it's a template document that's provided by LAIF, and they require boards to approve it in order to do business with them. So we're already authorized to do business with them through the investment policy. This is the additional step that they require.
I understand, I'm just making a point.
This is Maureen in Concord. Question, does that vote require a roll call vote? It seems to list, all of that information in the resolution.
Yeah,
City by city.
if we have no one opposing, then I don't believe there's a need to go through the roll call, but we certainly can. If folks would
Thank you.
prefer.
That's fine.
The assembly requires notice of who's absent.
Any other comments, questions, concerns from Concord?
This is Eddie Bursan in Concord, from Concord. The form that I have, says at the top, ayes, noes, abstain, and absent. We don't have a roll call. Is that going to be a technicality?
You took a roll call at the beginning.
Roll call at the beginning.
We'd certainly do that if everyone would feel more comfortable doing so.
Probably a good idea for when we have people walking in at different times, so.
Yeah,
Right.
sure, that's fine.
All right, let's do the first motion first, and we'll do a roll call first on the motion that was made by Director Bailey, seconded by Director Wagon-Connect to approve policy 014, investment policy.
Athos,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Pearson,
Bursan, yes.
Blackwell,
Yes.
Butt, Kohler, Cruz, Glover, Green, Hariff,
Yes.
Higgins,
Yes.
Longmire,
Yes.
Lyman,
Here? Yes.
McCaskill, McCullough,
Yes.
McEntee, Kulik,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Russell, Schroeder, Schwartzman, Sears,
Yes.
Toms,
Yes.
Tatson,
Yes.
Trotter,
Aye.
Wagon Connect, Carlston,
Yes.
Withy.
Yes.
Great, and so now we'll do a roll call for the second motion. That was for the resolution, which was also a motion made by Director Bailey and seconded by Director Wagon-Connect.
Athos,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Burson,
Yes.
Blackwell,
Yes.
Butt,
Yes.
Kohler,
Yes.
Cruz, Glover, Green, Hariff,
Yes.
Higgins,
Yes.
Longmire,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
McCaskill, McCullough,
Yes.
McEntee, Kulik,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Russell, Schroeder. Schroeder,
He's not here.
Not here.
Schwartzman, Sears,
Yes.
Toms, Tatson,
Yes.
Trotter,
Aye.
Wagon Connect, Carlston,
Yes.
Withy.
Yes.
All right, great, thank you very much.
Yes, as it.
Anything else, anybody? All right, so let's move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is proposed energy risk management policy. And David, I assume you're on for this as well.
As well. Good,
Excellent.
everyone. Am I on?
Yep.
Pleased to present to your board a proposed energy risk management policy for MCE. As you all know, MCE is an active participant in California energy markets, and we have and has been since 2010. And we've developed a variety of processes and procedures to manage market risks that we encounter. This policy essentially codifies those practices and procedures, summarizes them in one place, and enables MCE to communicate our risk management framework internally to stakeholders and to other market participants. I think to understand this energy risk management policy, it's important to take a step back and understand the context of what it is that MCE does and does not do. This policy is very much geared towards our agency specifically and our agency's activities. So what we don't do is we don't own generating assets or transmission assets or distribution assets. We don't engage in trading and we don't employ traders. We're a not-for-profit agency. The staff incentives are not tied to performance or stock markets. And we don't trade any derivative instruments or own any derivative instruments. So our activities are unlike a typical investor-owned utility or a municipal utility. Substantially all of our energy is contracted through written contracts, and our CEO is the only person who is authorized to execute those contracts. So again, this policy is written to address MCE's activities specifically. And you may encounter in the world energy risk management policies which contain a bunch of material that just is not applicable to MCE. It's important to also emphasize that this is an energy risk management policy. There's a variety of risks that MCE faces and manages in the market which are not included in this policy. And these are primarily are legal and regulatory related. So for instance, if the CPUC does, California Public Utility Commission, moves sideways on our energy efficiency funding, then that would be something that definitely is a risk that we manage, but it's not something that is included with us in this policy. Similarly, risks that are insurable, such as fire and theft and workers' compensation, et cetera, are not covered by this policy. This policy came together over a period of years, really. And as I mentioned before, it reflects MCE's business and the practices and procedures that we have developed in order to manage risk over those years. We also took into consideration and read through a great number of other risk management policies that are used by other organizations, and we drew from those what we consider to be industry best practice in terms of the management of MCE risk. And lastly, we also leaned heavily upon Sam Kang, who is a representative from Pacific Energy Advisors and has a great deal of experience with risk management and with the development of policies. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to allow Sam to introduce himself to your board.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, and just to add to what David's saying, this policy is important to MCE because if you look at a lot of the different agencies and a lot of the different regulatory groups out there, they will look to MCE as MCE gets more active in the procurement business. For what sort of policies do you have in place to manage your risk? This is a very important policy. Anyway, so my background, a little bit of my background, I have over 20 years experience in the energy markets, at least 10 of which are in energy risk management. And on the risk management side, the experience spans from hedging strategies, portfolio management, assessing, managing, measuring risk, and of course, drafting risk policies. So I've drafted directly at least 1 to 2 dozen risk policies globally, including for IOUs, munis, and co-ops. And for agencies and companies such as PG&E Energy Services, Sempra Energy Solutions, most recently at PG&E. I was a director there as market credit risk. So have some experience in this area, and very, very happy to work with this talented group of people to put this very important piece of work together. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Sam. I'm going to cover the major risks that MCE faces in the market, and then how we address those risks. Those are, and I'm just summarizing them briefly. These are market price risks. As you are aware, there is a spot market for energy prices in California, and we set rates for customers with a view to be able to provide them with stable and competitive rates. But of course, energy market prices in the spot market are moving up and down. So to manage that risk, we enter into short, medium, and long-term power purchase agreements in order to hedge that market risk. We face counterparty and performance risk, and we manage that risk in adherence with our credit guidelines. And that includes preference for working with credit investment grade rated entities, and we vet basically all of the counterparties that we work with before we do so. There's also load and generation volumetric risk. So as you're well aware, we have a lot of variable generating assets such as wind and solar, and we deal with that risk by ensuring we have a well-diversified portfolio of generating assets with which we contract. Load variability is another very important risk, and we manage that carefully, primarily through contracting with Pacific Energy Advisors and using their services to estimate and forecast our load. We have operational risk, which we manage primarily through hiring people who are qualified to run this business. And when we contract for energy, we go through a review process with all of our contracts. Many of you will be familiar with it who sit on the ad hoc contracts committee or the technical committee. But internally, every contract needs to be signed off by myself, who's the head of finance, Greg Brem, who's the head of procurement, Steve Hall, who's our outside legal counsel, and by Pacific Energy Advisors, usually John DeLessie will sign off on those contracts as well. So we cover the gambit in terms of our review of all of these $2 billion worth of contracts that MCE has entered into. Liquidity risk is managed primarily through ensuring that we have adequate cash and bank lines of credit, but also making sure that our contracts don't allow the counterparties to impose posting requirements upon us, which would impose upon our liquidity. Lastly, we have legal and regulatory risk, and Don and the procurement team or the legal team actively manage those risks in the legislative and regulatory arenas. Keys to risk management, generally segregation of responsibilities and checks and balances, an agency culture that is attuned to risk, effective hiring and training of staff and of contracting with top quality professionals in the industry. Reporting and metrics, it's critical to understand your risks and to communicate those risks within the organization, and delegation of authority to folks who are qualified to make the particular decisions that are required. Lastly, I'm going to cover the governance of the policy. There's a 2-year review cycle. This is being presented to your board for approval. Following that, it will be that the responsibility for making modifications to the policy will be delegated to the technical committee. And I'll maybe leave governance at that and open it up for questions.
Any questions for David?
Question here in Concord. This is Dave Trotter. Under the question of governance, looking at this, the technical committee responsibilities as set forth here basically are to review the policy and update it as necessary. And then there's a risk oversight committee that includes, I guess, 4 members that are all on the payroll. And my question is, wouldn't it be advisable or a good idea to amend the membership of the Risk Oversight Committee to include, just for example, the chair of the technical committee and perhaps one other member, so you have direct board interaction at an earlier stage with respect to whether we are properly managing our risk, understanding that it is a risky environment that we're operating in. Seems to me that makes sense.
Yeah, I appreciate that suggestion. I was remiss in not mentioning that this policy had been presented to the technical committee, had been reviewed with the technical committee, and there was a robust discussion about the governance. So I just wanted to provide you with that context. In my view, in order to effectively manage risk, you need to be relatively nimble and have staff in place who are able to address the risks that we face during the normal course of business. There is the role of the technical committee, which obviously involves staff, is the oversight of that process. And that includes, I think you'll note, the ability of technical committee to review, as necessary, the activities of and undertake an independent review of the activities of the organization if it has concerns. But I think in a practical matter, to have board members participating in the ROC committee meeting would be, it's an idea, but I'm comfortable with the way that we've designed it at present.
If I can just push back for a moment, this policy indicates that they'll meet, once per calendar quarter. And it seems to me that on a quarterly basis, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have two members of the technical committee, to be looking at this and being able to get an early either to say things are fine or get some kind of an early warning system that maybe we need to be paying attention to this. I don't know if this issue was raised specifically at the technical committee, which reviewed this policy, which I otherwise think is very good. But I'd like to open that up for a broader board discussion to see if there's any interest in what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, I have one quick comment, and then I'd love to open it up to other members of the technical committee to weigh in on the idea. I think that the suggestion could certainly work, and maybe another way of approaching it would be to have more frequent updates provided to the technical committee if there was an appetite for that. I think that what I want to point out here is that the creation of the Risk Oversight Committee isn't a taking authority away from technical committee. It's actually just adding an extra layer of staff requirement that was happening on an ad hoc basis, but we wanted to make it more formal in a written policy, and it's really adding a kind of a staff oversight kind of point in time where we check in. That will be useful from an internal operations perspective. But if there's an interest at the board level in having more frequent updates, that might be appropriate to do via the technical committee, because we certainly do have meetings on a regular basis.
And I think, and in speaking as the chair of the technical committee, I think that's a good idea. To have more frequent reviews. And we did have a lively conversation in TechCom when this came before us about governance issues and about reporting and information transparency issues. And so it makes a lot of sense to me to have more frequent updates as just part of our regular technical committee meetings.
And this is Don Tatson from Concord. I also participated in the technical committee discussion. I agree with the idea of more frequent updates. I'm also respectful of the distinction of the roles of management and the board. And I have a concern that putting selected representatives of management on essentially a staff committee is blurring that distinction. And so I was comfortable with the power that's given to the technical committee to initiate and oversee a review of the implementation of the policy as it deems necessary, which means at any time. So that should there become sufficient concerns about what's going on, the technical committee can command the resources of the organization to conduct a thorough review, either by itself or using third parties.
This is Scott Perkins in Concord. I'd suggest that at a minimum that a record of the meeting of the Risk Oversight Committee be prepared and presented to the technical committee. More than just the quick summary of minutes, but a summary of what happened and what was the result of the discussion?
And if I could just, this is Dave Trotter again, listening to the other comments here in this room and also over in San Rafael, perhaps an alternative way to address the concerns that I'm raising is to add a sentence to 7.2, which specifically refers to the obligation of the Risk Oversight Committee to make more regular reports to the technical committee so that that information does get out and maybe it more properly respects the divide that Don is concerned about between the board and management. But as I said, right now, the language, I see the language in 7.2 as being not as strong as it could be. As it deems necessary, that's fine, but if the technical committee doesn't know what's going on and is not getting a regular quarterly report, for example, how will they know that it's necessary? So I think institutionally, that additional sentence would make sense.
You could put it in 7.3, whereas the Risk Oversight Committee will report the results of their quarterly meeting to the Technical Oversight Committee, or the Technical Committee.
What do people think about that?
This is Sam. Before maybe we go, I think, problem solving, maybe I can just present some of the best practices in the industry. And this is more driven, I think, by efficiency and by not being redundant in terms of taking precious time away from the board members. Normally, the Risk Oversight Committee is comprised of senior management of the muni, co-op, or IOU, or whatever it is. And in the instances where there's something that occurs that is out of the parameters within the risk policy or it merits some sort of discussion or some sort of notification to the board or technical committee, that's what this is for. Having said that, there's no reason why any members of the board or technical committee can attend these Risk Oversight Committee meetings. It's not exclusive. I mean, there can be a standing invitation, so whenever it comes up, we can send an invitation out, and then if you have time and would like to attend, you're more than welcome to. So it's just one of those things that, it's, once again, it's been delegated, so from the board to the technical committee reviews this and says, okay, does this make sense? Are these instances where we want to be notified, we want to know what's going on? And then it's up to the Risk Oversight Committee to implement that. So having said that, that's the reason why we kind of had to set up. Risk Oversight Committee specifically excludes people that are directly included in the deal making or in the front office types of roles. So it's based upon people that are more in the mid to back office or more operational that have no vested interest in making the good deal. And and the prime example is these type of things are set up because of to avoid the rogue trader. Right? So people have heard stories about Nick Leeson bringing down Barings Bank and stuff, and I think David made it very clear, this is not a trading organization, it's procurement. However, this is the whole idea of the Risk Oversight Committee is to say, okay, we're going to review the market, we're going to see what our positions are, we're going to see what our risks are. If there's any trading violations, anything, we notify, technical committee gets notified. So that's kind of the impetus for this policy. And once again, board members here can always get involved. And my suggestion is that the way to do that is to have, when the ROC meetings are being held, to basically have an open invitation for anybody who'd like to join. That's kind of the industry best practice.
It's Rich Carlson in Concord. I want to underscore Don's comment that the board should get copies of the minutes of the meeting and a little bit more on the report so that those members of the board who don't have the ability to attend can at least be up to date on what's happening at the risk management.
And we're talking, I guess, this is Dave Trotter. Scott suggested you could put that sentence I'm talking about in 7.3, and it's not that difficult of a sentence, quite frankly, to write. And that would fight for that quarterly reporting. We could move forward and go on to any other issues that need to be addressed here today. Rather than resist this idea, which is sensible.
If I may.
Yes, please, Greg.
Greg Lyman, El Cerrito. I participated in the
I was one of two of the board members that participated in helping the strategic plan. And I will say that it was very valuable to have a board member participating during that process. But that process is not the same as this, because that process did not have a board or a subcommittee that it reported to. And so having board members participate in that sort of ad hoc development of the strategic plan was useful. In this case, where we have a standing meeting, a technical comm that meets regularly, I think it's very prudent for us to have the ROC report to the TechCom. Someone made a comment that the Risk Oversight Committee should be generating meeting minutes, and I'm going to say I don't think so. They're not a public meeting. I think that their reports to the TechCom would be adequate to capture any anomalies that they are reporting out on, but that put a burden on them to put action items together for their committee is not necessarily appropriate. So I do agree that there's something should be added to 7.3 that says that that the Risk Oversight Committee should bring issues to the Technicom at an appropriate time. So I definitely think there should be a report out responsibility, but I don't believe it should be minutes, and I don't believe it should be everything that the Risk Oversight Committee dealt with.
It's Rich Carlson again from Concord. There was apparently a misunderstanding. I'm talking about the minutes from the Tech Committee after the risk management is reported and have considered the issues.
Thanks for clarifying that, Dr. Perkins. I've got that down. That's helpful.
You're just not here.
Kevin, did you want to say something, Kevin?
I don't have any, this is Kevin Harrell from City of Larkspur. I don't have anything more to add. I just want to express my concurrence with what Greg Lyman said. There's no reason for minutes, and the reporting is fine.
Okay.
But I think it's essential to maintain some separation between the two functions.
Other comments? Barbara, did you have something?
It's related to the policy, but not, Barbara Kohler, Fairfax. It's related to the policy, but not this issue. First of all, I want to say I think this is great that we're here, and appreciate that now we have Sam on board as a consultant to help us get to this point with all his years of experience. So I think this is really a nice add-on to really firming up what we do and how we try to minimize risk for our customers. So thank you for that. But I did have two questions, and I think I'm going to direct them to Sam. So with all your years of experience and writing these kinds of policy, and that was the question before you spoke, where I was wondering, did we look at others? And clearly we did. The first question is, were there things that you added to this policy with all your years of experience that you've been kind of itching to add to make things better? And that would be the first question. The second question, and I think David already answered this, is there also an insurance product that could back up this policy, or is there nothing like that available? So those are just two simple questions, and I don't know if they're for David or Sam or both. Thank you.
Insurance question, that's my area of responsibility. And the short answer is yes and no, I suppose. There's a variety, we have a variety of insurance
So I'm
policies.
not asking about the insurance for fire, earthquake. What I'm saying, is there any kind of...
There's errors in admissions insurance, which would cover errors that create risks that relate to this policy. But there's not a policy, an insurance policy, or a market for an insurance policy that would cover in general this risk management policy.
Great, thank you. And then the other question was there something wonderful that you added to this to make it even stronger than the ones you've written in the past? Well, I haven't read others, so no.
No, the reality is we did spend, even though it's short, we spent a lot of time on this because we wanted to make sure that this fit what MCE does and it's appropriate. There are risk policies that are, 50, 100, 200 pages long, right? And it's things that aren't even necessarily required for what MCE does. There are stuff there is stuff in here that I would say we actually took more stuff out than we did add in. But we did tailor it specifically to what MCE does.
Thank you.
One of the things that really struck me when Sam was presenting this to our technical committee a couple weeks ago was the kind of the focus on making sure that it's a useful living document. I think that you were commenting on those big 200-page documents typically sit on a shelf and collect a lot of dust, and they don't actually get used. And adhering to them can be difficult because they're not fresh in the mind of the operational staff. So I've really appreciated the attention that's been focused to make sure that this is a really usable, simple yet comprehensive document, and that's been really valuable to us.
Yeah, and thanks. And just, I'm sorry, one more comment. So and whenever I work on a policy, it's always with the aim that if we would be audited, that we would fly with flying colors. I know there are a lot of documents out there that when people actually do get audited, they fail miserably because you don't even know what's in there, right? But this is a document that's it's workable, it's doable, and it'll take care of MCE.
Great, thank you, Sam. So I'd like to come back to this, the issue that I feel there's some degree of agreement on, which is adding language to 7.3 about more updates to the technical committee. Did you have a thought?
I can
on that, Dave?
propose, I've
That'd
written
be
something
great.
down that I hope reflects what the intent of the board is. So I wrote, the Risk Oversight Committee will provide periodic reports to the Technical Committee in order to highlight risk management issues as appropriate.
I think that's.
Periodic or quarterly?
Pardon me?
I use the word periodic. I think it's incumbent upon us as staff to bring, in any event, whether we have this language or not, if there is a risk management related issue that it merits the attention of the board, it's our job to bring it to your attention, whether there's, we're at the end of the quarter or not. But I'll leave that up to you folks.
Right. Ray?
Ray Withy, Sausalito. Get used to this, right? So I think with David's suggested language and what I'm hearing is that, I think David and Dawn are correctly saying that if there's something, the very last sentence of 7.3, 7.3 basically says, at any time, if there's an issue, then that is going to be brought basically to the tech committee as soon as it meets. But I think what I'm also hearing is there, in addition, is a layer of just routine reporting to the technical committee, even if it's, we had an ROC meeting and nothing came up, and so I think that's what I'm hearing is being asked for, is just every time ROC meets, there's a report at the next technical committee meeting that no issues were observed, that's
right. I think that's right. The
So-
technical committee gets an update.
Yeah, the committee gets an update, every time the ROC meets. I think that's what would satisfy what everybody's hearing, right? But you shouldn't in any way diminish what's in the last sentence, that if an issue comes up, it comes straight to TechCom.
Right. Thank you. So that was, I heard a vote for quarterly rather than periodic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Well, I think what Ray is saying, is Don Tassin, is that it be following every ROC meeting, whether that's quarterly, monthly, weekly, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably quarterly.
Yeah. I would personally be okay with quarterly as Dave Trotter. I had other proposed language, but I'm not sure anybody wants to hear it, but I did draft something.
Well, Dave, we don't want your work to go to waste, so if you want to share it, feel free.
I was going to say, on at least a quarterly basis, the ROC shall provide a report to the technical committee regarding the ROC's meetings, deliberations, and any other matters of concern.
Can you repeat that?
Sure.
Please.
On at least a quarterly basis, the ROC shall provide a report to the technical committee regarding the ROC's meetings, deliberations, and any other matters of concern.
And the last part was regarding its meetings, deliberations, and,
Deliberations, and any other matters of concern.
thank you.
Sort of covers the waterfront.
Meetings, deliberations, and any other matters of concern.
And I would move approval of this policy with that one change, which I think should be in the second paragraph of 7.3 after the first sentence.
I'll second the motion.
Great, thanks for that suggested language. Does that language raise any concerns to you, Sam, or you, David? Okay, super, great. We got a motion and a second. Any other comment from the board? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, that's approved. Thank you much. Thanks, everybody. I think that was a good enhancement.
Thank you.
And shall we do the roll call vote since
Ah,
it's a
everybody.
policy?
What's up with you Concord people loving roll calls so much? We're a little more relaxed here in Marin County.
It's called the Brown Act.
Yeah.
Oh. No.
Athos. Bailey.
Yes.
Burson.
Yes.
Blackwell.
Yes.
Butt.
Yes.
Kohler. Cruz. Glover. Green. Hariff.
Yes.
Higgins.
Yes.
Benales. Lyman.
Yes.
McCaskill. McCullough.
Yes.
McEntee. Kulik.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Russell. Schroeder. Schwartzman. Sears.
Yes.
Toms.
Yes.
Tatson.
Yes.
Trotter.
Aye.
Wagon Connect.
Yes.
Carlston.
Yes.
Withy.
Yes.
All right, very good. Thank you, everyone.
Can you add Longmire to that? I think you called Benalis, but you didn't call Longmire.
Sorry, Pete. Longmire.
Yes.
All right. Did everybody get included? Yeah, we. All right. All right, I think we're good. So let's move on to item 7 on our agenda, which is
I'm
proposed.
so sorry to interrupt. We aren't sure who made the second to that motion.
It's a really excellent question. Who in Concord second? Was it a Concord second to that last motion?
Burson.
That was Director Bursan?
It's Burson and Concord.
Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. All right. I'd really like us to move on to item 7 now on the agenda, which is our proposed electric vehicle rates for fiscal year 2018-19. And who's doing that one?
I will be, yes.
Ah, Justin, yes, thank you.
This
You're
is-
blending in nicely with the board members.
Thank you very much. I tried to go incognito. This is Justin Kudo, Deputy Director for Account Services. I'll be speaking about the proposed changes to electric vehicle rates. So over the last several months, MCE's completed its annual review of rates. We've been ensuring cost recovery, rate competitiveness, and consistency with our rate design policies as we always do. Through the budgetary process, as well as the rate setting, technical, and executive committee meetings, the review's shown that MCE expects to add approximately $54 million to its reserves, while continuing to provide a 3 to 4% discount by maintaining rates at their current levels. During the review process, staff determined that the rate schedule EV for electric vehicles was somewhat inconsistent in design with the design of PG&E's rates, and that it merited reevaluation. Through discussion in the rate-setting technical and executive committees, there has been a consensus that this rate could be adjusted and overall reduced. The proposal before you is the product of these discussions, as well as input from members of the public that have been participating in some of these committee meetings. It's important to explain a little more background on what the EV rate is. EV is a residential time of use rate, which is optional for customers who have electric vehicles. You must have either an electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid vehicle to participate in the rate. By May, we expect to have approximately 5,000 customers that are utilizing this rate throughout our service area. EV is a complex residential rate schedule that has 6 different time periods. There are seasonal, quote-unquote, summer and winter periods, as well as peak, partial peak, and off-peak time of use periods. Unlike most time of use rates, off-peak rates are designed for electric vehicle charging overnight in a very late night hour during weekdays. That's a 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. window. So it's expected that you use a timer to do that for your electric vehicle. And then during the weekends, that's a little more flexible. It includes that 11 p.m. to 6 in the morning, but also includes a couple hours around that, including midday charging during the weekends. The impetus for changing these rates is that currently MCE's EV rates are just slightly higher than those of PG&E, and further, our off-peak rates, those which are used for charging, are higher than those offered by PG&E. Under the rates that are proposed, we'd be increasing our rates for peak usage while decreasing our rates during the partial and off-peak periods to incentivize customers to charge their electric vehicles and move their electricity usage to those times. The adjustment would particularly benefit customers who do have high usage on their electric vehicles, and it would make sure that our EV rate is consistent with the rate that's provided by PG&E. This would reduce our revenues for the current fiscal year. We're projecting that the revenue reduction would be approximately $308,000 for the fiscal year. And that's based on the current number of participants on the EV rate across MC service area, as well as their usage. Staff has recommended adopting the revisions that are provided in Table 1. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Justin. Any questions for Justin?
Eddie Bursan in Concord. Has any of our customers complained?
No, we haven't received complaints about the current rate design, but we did receive a comment during some of the technical and executive committee meetings to adjust these rates and ensure that any adjustment we did make would favor solar customers the same as it would favor non-solar customers.
Yeah. Greg Lyman, El Cerrito, and Justin, I want to thank you for your correspondence with Howdy Gowdy, who was the public speaker at the TechCom and at an earlier meeting on this topic. And he is quite a numbers cruncher, and his analysis, to get to your comment, Eddie, is that it actually will, it's a pretty good deal for EV customers that have solar panels. So I want to thank you for your work with Howdy, and the rate schedule that you've worked out seems to be quite complimentary for our customers.
Thank you.
Super. Any other comments or questions from the board? All right, would someone like to?
This is Scott Ferguson in Concord. I recognize this is on the EV rates. I'm not aware of what the process is. Since we didn't change any of our other rates, and I noticed that wasn't on the agenda, is that because we're not changing anything? We just keep right on going and it doesn't get a discussion?
Dawn?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. So through the rate setting ad hoc committee, there was discussion about a month ago or 6 weeks ago, where we talked about the current status of our rates, and it was determined that the recommendation to go forward to the committees and to the board was to keep rates where they are, with the one exception being this EV residential rate. And so that's what we're presenting to the board today based on the recommendation from that ad hoc committee.
Yes, I know. I sat on that committee. I'm just curious that the board doesn't get to weigh in as a whole on the recommendation of the ad hoc rate committee?
Yeah, well, we don't typically revisit the same conversation that's held at the committee level to the board. Just in the interest of time, we tend to bring, what's recommended. This discussion was also brought to our technical committee and executive committee a couple of weeks ago for a more in-depth discussion. So typically at the board level, we don't repeat that discussion, but this is actually a great opportunity for folks that were on those committees to weigh in if you feel like there's more detail that you'd like to share with your colleagues, and we can certainly answer questions. And if there's an interest in hearing more at the board level about rates in general, we could certainly schedule that for a future meeting.
Point of clarity?
The reason I bring it up is I assume that not everybody is on one of those two committees, that there are some members that are not on either the technical or executive committee. Is that a true statement, or is that not true?
That is correct. Yeah, folks have chosen to be on the committees where they want to provide input.
And you weren't on the technical committee, and you're not on the executive committee, you don't know what happened.
Right. Correct.
And that's why I suggested that in the future that it at least be brought up as a report, even if it doesn't get voted on.
Yeah, so the minutes of our technical committee and executive committee are all posted and available, and we can make sure that we get those to you if you haven't received them. That provides some information. But I think taking a step back, sort of big picture, there's been kind of a conscious decision at the board level to delegate some of the getting into the weeds discussions to the committees. We've had a history of having some pretty long board meetings in the past, and as the board has grown, there's been an interest in making sure that we can really maintain the same level of being able to get into the weeds, but be able to have those conversations in the committees where folks are really interested in the topic and able to really dig in and look at the material in advance and weigh in.
Point of clarity, though. I think that we are going to, as a board, weigh in on accepting the rates. And I think that the confusion is that the assumption was that the TechCom set the rates, and all the TechCom did was recommend this to the full board, and there will be a motion tonight to accept the rate. So I just wanted to, I'm not sure if that was your concern, but.
Yeah, that was kind of my concern, but I don't see any staff report on the other rates or a recommendation or a motion or a resolution or anything. I missed that.
Yeah. So one other thing that might be worth mentioning is that we have a history of going through the rate setting process typically at the beginning of the year, but there have been times when we've adjusted rates at other points in the year. And I think at this time, given the relatively steady state that we're seeing at the PG&E rate level, there's actually a slight increase on the generation front that made MCE rates even more, create more of a competitive outcome on the MCE side, and the fact that we were meeting our budgetary obligations for the coming year, there was perceived to be no need to make a change at this time, but there's certainly an opportunity to do that at any time in the future if there was an interest among the board or the committee members.
Great.
But potentially and I don't know if we can do it under the Brown Act for this particular case, but essentially, if I'm hearing what you're asking for, Scott, that the motion would be all our rates should remain the same except for adopting these new EV rates.
Well, that's not what's on our agenda, though.
Right, but
We're
that's
not
what-
specifically addressing other rates on this agenda item, so I don't think we could actually do that. But, Scott, you're welcome to join us on the technical committee or the ad hoc rate setting committee as well going
I am
forward.
on the technical committee, and I am on the rate setting committee.
Then you know about this already.
Yes, I was expressing a concern for those members who aren't on those committees.
But the recommendation, this is Maureen Toms from Concord, the recommendation is to accept the proposed revisions to the Schedule EV as set forth in Table 1, is it?
Correct.
Okay.
We're only addressing the EV rates on this agenda
Right.
item.
So the board does have the opportunity to accept that.
For the electrical vehicles.
Correct, and the rates that are currently in effect for MCE, there's no motion needed to keep them the same.
Can I suggest a solution, an easy solution to Scott's issue? Why don't we agendize on consent at our next meeting an item to approve the entire rate schedule? That way we will have blessed whatever happened here.
Bad idea.
Yeah, I don't think that would set a good precedent. I mean, the rates that are in place are, the motion would be to reapprove rates that are already in place, and that would,
Right.
I don't know that there would be need for that. There could be some problems created with that.
Kevin, did you want to say something?
I guess I'm just a little confused, and maybe my confusion is a function of the fact that I wasn't able to attend the last board meeting. But I'm also a member of, well, the technical and the executive committee and the ad hoc rate setting committee, so I've heard this discussion and I'm very comfortable with it. I guess my impression is, and just for clarity, we're here only to consider the EV rate tonight. But it was my impression that on an annual basis, we always, as a board, approve the rates overall going forward. Is that incorrect?
Yeah, typically, we go through a rate change process in alignment with our budget setting process. But this is the second year in our history where we have not gone through that typical timing process. There is no mandate that we stick to a certain process. It's really determined based on the needs of the agency. And in the year that we did our enrollment for the prior enrollment in Contra Costa with 5 communities, the rate change was delayed until September of that year due to some, a wide range of issues. This year, the timing is a little different because PG&E did not go through their standard January 1 rate change until March. And when that rate change occurred, that was the time when we began deliberating on whether we needed to change our rates. And due to the outcome of that rate change compared to where our rates were, there was not a need perceived to make any change at that time. Certainly, I mean, if the board would be interested, I think maybe what's lacking here, and particularly since we have quite a few new board members, we haven't had a board discussion of how we do rate setting in general, how we do our analysis, and I think it's a really interesting conversation, actually, and might be useful to do that maybe at our next board meeting, just so folks understand the process that we went through at the executive committee and the technical committee to reach the conclusion that no change is needed. But I don't think we need to take action to make no change, but I do think that having a discussion about how we've gone through the process is a fabulous idea.
I think that's a good idea. We could set that as an informational item. Sorry to interrupt,
okay.
Kevin. Did you?
That's what I was, actually, that's what I was looking for, was an informational discussion. No action necessary.
Kevin, did you have
Yeah,
more
yeah. Again,
comments?
Kevin Harrell from the city of Larkspur, and that's all fine. And you know, I hear this discussion a lot, so it's not for me personally something that I feel I necessarily need. But I guess it's just confusion on my part, because my recollection was at the executive committee, I think it was the executive committee meeting where we discussed the overall rate structure for the year going forward. And we're agreeing in that context that a change was not appropriate, and discussed some of the reasons why a change was not appropriate. And we talked about our reserve policy, and we talked about the need for rate structures that would be attractive to new customers in our new service area, and a variety of different considerations that went into the decision to not change the rate. And we made that decision in the context of the executive board, or executive committee. But and all those committees. But my impression was that the decision was to recommend to the full board that outcome, as opposed to that was the decision that would then carry forward for the organization as a whole. So that was maybe a confusion on my part. I thought it was a vote to approve a recommendation to this board to keep the rates the same, with the exception of the EV rate, which raised certain issues that we needed to flesh out. But that was my understanding about what we were doing at the executive board. So maybe I'm just confused.
So this is Dave Trotter in Moraga. I was my understanding too, which is why I come back to, there wasn't time to do that before the rates went into effect. Which is why a simple ratification on consent is a streamlined way to give everybody a chance to actually approve these at the full board level, and if anybody has a concern, they can take it off consent. I don't think that's going to happen, but that way at least we've, put it through the entire board of directors that has to take responsibility for these rates. They get set in their own individual communities.
Yeah, but it sounds like I'm also hearing something a little different where folks would, at the board level, would actually like to hear a presentation on how the rate setting process happens and how the outcome was arrived at. Is that how folks are feeling?
And how I would like to proceed at this point is to schedule that kind of an informational session on the rate setting process and how we do it. For our next board meeting or as soon as we have a time on the agenda. But for this evening, I'd really like to focus on the proposed electric vehicle rates. And if there is any more discussion on this particular rate item, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So, Madam Chair, I move to approve the...
Do I have thank you, Ray. Do I have a second?
I'll be happy to second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Discussion.
Whoa, discussion. I asked for discussion, Eddie Bursan, and...
All right, go ahead.
If you look at the table 1, which presents these rates, I'm sure if I understand it correctly, I don't know what the categories are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but assuming we just number them from the top, I see that what we're doing in several of these cases is we're actually raising our rates basically to match what PG&E is, and then we are on several, like rates 5 and 6, we're going below, or on 6, we're going below. My question is on column 2, row 2, where we have 0.075 now, the PG&E rate is 0.084. Why would we lower our rate even further? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, thank you. So it appears that some of the labels here didn't carry over. The ordering of these would be the summer peak rate followed by the summer partial peak rate, and then the summer off-peak rate, and then also the winter peak, winter partial, and winter off-peak rate. The rate that you're referring to specifically here is the summer partial peak rate. That does coincide during particularly sunny months, does coincide with the middle of the day. During discussion at committees leading up to this, there was a concern that we wanted to drive some electricity usage into that partial peak period because it coincides with so much solar production, and that's something that we want to encourage because we do have a lot of solar power.
Have you seen any evidence that a 0.075 has had any effect on the actual usage that you seek to encourage? In other words, do people really care? And can they really measure that much? So why are we giving up $100,000?
I think what we get to in this is how we message customers and how we communicate with customers. I think we want to be consistent with the rate designs that otherwise would exist for them through PG&E, and we still want to be consistent with trying to push usage into periods of the day where usage is lower. I think if we, under the current designs, we have a lot of inconsistency with PG&E where some of our generation rates are a little bit higher. In some cases, they're a lot lower. In other places, they're more significantly higher. And that can create some customer confusion. It can create sort of shopping between PG&E and MCE of, well, depending on what time of day I personally use electricity, I would do better on MCE or PG&E. And going on the proposal here, what this does is it keeps our peak rate right at parity with PG&E, right? The same price as PG&E, but it provides a discount in both the partial and off-peak periods that's consistent with the discount that we're providing to other residential customers not on the EV rate.
Yes, but you haven't answered my question, whether you have heard from the customers that this is actually a behavior pattern which they, the customers, act on. You're saying our explanation to the customers is this, and that. I'm not interested in your going to the customers. I want to know what motivates the customer. If the customer isn't truly motivated and is not responding to a .005 response, I don't see any reason why we should, since we're already below PG&E, our message can be very simple, that on category 2, hey, you can either pay them 0.84 or pay us 0.075. We've been such a great people. You know, we're a good supplier. Why throw money away?
Yeah, I think you're raising a really excellent point, and this is definitely part of the dialogue that we had in our committee discussions. I think that really this isn't a proposal that's driven by customer concern, I don't think. I think it's more driven by MCE's policy objectives around utilizing the solar power that we have in our portfolio and incentivizing usage during those peak hours of solar production. So it's more of a policy decision and trying to move in the right direction and providing the right price signals to folks. And I think that, you know, Justin has gotten input from customers that really pushed us the other direction, away from kind of where we'd ideally like our policy position to be on rates, because the practical reality is that customers are going to be charging in the evening. And so we tried to kind of strike a balance here and make sure that no MCE residential EV customers are paying more with MCE, but that we do have some price signals that try and push people away from using energy when there's the most demand. What adds complexity to this whole discussion, and where we spent a lot of time in the committees, was really talking about how we are sort of stuck with using the time of use periods that PG&E offers. Their peak time period is different than we would like it to be, particularly between the hours of 2 and 5 p.m. Folks are discouraged from charging on the PG&E time of use rate. But we would like to be able to encourage charging during that time, because there's a lot of excess solar on the grid. Sometimes it's even curtailed. And so creating more load during that time period aligns with our mission. But we're hopeful that PG&E is going to be shifting those time of use periods soon, within the next year or two, and that will make it easier for us to establish rates that align with our goals of utilizing that renewable energy on the grid. So that's just maybe more detail than you wanted, but I just wanted to...
It also goes to a certain fundamental different approach. I would approach it by saying, what are the decisions that a electrical vehicle owner makes on when he charges or she charges? Starting from that point, then we make our rates. And if the decision to when they charge has got nothing to do with money, all right, and may have everything to do with when grandma is not available to babysit the kids, then we should be taking an appropriate market pricing structure, because what you are calling an incentive is meaningless.
I think the reality is that we have a whole variety of customers in our service area, and that different individuals may be motivated by different decision points that cause them to behave as they do. And so that leaves us with a tool of incentives, which is what this proposed rate is intended to accomplish. And we certainly, as with any rate, will come back and take a look at it after an appropriate period of time and see if we think it's having an effect or not, and whether we need to revise the rate accordingly once we have sort of more experience with the rate and perhaps input from some of our users.
Well, like I said, I prefer to get the input from the users first.
Okay.
Then.
Okay, I appreciate that input. But I do feel the need to move on. Is there any other comments or input? Ray, were you going to say something? No. Okay. Any other comments? All right. Other discussion points from anyone in the Concord office? Okay, we had a motion and a second on the table. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition?
Yeah, no, myself,
And who is that who opposed?
Eddie Bursan from Concord.
Anyone else in opposition? All right, very good. So let's move on to the last item on our agenda, which is, I think, a legislative and regulatory update.
Yeah, so Nathaniel and I are going to present on a couple of items that are on the regulatory front. And there's been a lot of activity since the beginning of the year on the regulatory front. So we're going to try not to overwhelm you. The biggest, really the most important proceeding, without a doubt, is the PCIA proceeding, Power Charge and Difference Adjustment proceeding. Nathaniel has been leading the efforts for MCE on that and doing an amazing job. So I'm going to turn it over to him in a minute. But first, I wanted to give you all a very brief update on another decision, proposed decision that was issued just a couple of weeks ago on our energy efficiency proposal that was submitted to the CPUC. It was initially drafted 2.5 years ago, believe it or not, and a proposed decision has just been issued to approve our proposal. And so I'm going to give you a couple of highlights about this proposed decision, which will probably be voted out within the next few weeks. The proposed decision approves the budgets that we have requested for a substantial increase in our energy efficiency program. Currently, we're at about $2.1 million a year. It would be growing to $7 million a year initially, and then over a 10-year term, it would increase to $11 million and then drop back off slightly to $9 million. The idea there is to create some incentives, create momentum, and continue at the incentive level that's needed to keep the momentum on the energy efficiency programs. We are happy, I'm happy to share the proposal with you all if you want more details about what will be offered through this program. Some of you may remember our proposal for the single point of contact, or the SPOC model, where we can help folks with all things related to energy. Some of those elements will be funded through this proposed plan. Other elements of the SPOC would be funded through grants or other activities that we have within MCE. The residential, single, and multifamily sector part of our proposal was approved, and we're really happy about that. The commercial sector, with the focus on small commercial, was approved, but with some concerns around, we were looking to find ways to minimize overlap with PG&E. And the way that the commission has handled that in the proposed decision is concerning to us, because we've had difficulty in the past engaging collaboratively with PG&E on offering commercial sector energy efficiency programs. So we'll be weighing in on that. The agricultural sector proposal was approved. The focus is on small ag customers with sales of 250,000 or less. We are looking for a different way to classify small agricultural customers so that we can address many or most of those that are in our community. We do have many ag customers that exceed that threshold, so we'll be looking to make adjustments there. And then the industrial sector request that we made in our proposal was rejected for now due to other programs underway, primarily through the IOUs. The last thing I'll say about the proposal and the proposed decision is that we were looking for what you may remember us talking about as first dibs on energy efficiency programs, so that we could do comprehensive upgrades in buildings rather than just cherry picking and only doing the light bulbs, for example, but doing deep retrofits that are more holistic and pay off more over the long haul. Unfortunately, we were not given first dibs on programs, and however, we were also we've been told that we need to meet the same cost-effectiveness requirements that the IOUs have to reach, and that's those two issues don't align with each other. If you are running programs that are for harder to reach customers, then your cost effectiveness numbers are going to be lower. So that's an issue that we'll be addressing going forward in the comments. But overall, it's a good proposed decision. We're pleased with the outcome with a few small exceptions. Are there any questions about that before I turn it over to Nathaniel? Yeah.
I hope we get it on. Or maybe you can use that one.
Just, have we ever considered trying to grab the government sector as well? Because, I was disappointed when we wanted to work with MCE, but we couldn't as a city. So just wondering if that's...
Yeah, great question. So the government sector buildings have typically been run by the PG&E partnership programs, and those operate in the County of Marin, Contra Costa County, and through a group in Napa as well. So we have partnered with them on those. We cross-refer. We didn't want to take away those programs, which seem to be running pretty well, but we do have really good partnerships with those local government partnerships is technically what they're called. I think in the future there may be a transition to have those programs come under the MCE umbrella, or there may not. I think that the good news is that there is so much room to do energy efficiency. We're not going to run out, and we don't need to compete with our local government partners. We can all do as much as we can, and there will still be more work to do.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Dawn, who's in charge of our energy, Sloan Bailey from Corte Madera, who's in charge of our energy efficiency program now at Marin Clean Energy?
Yeah, great question. So we're actually at a transition point because our Director of Customer Programs, Becky Menton, departed from MCE about a month ago, and we are in the process of interviewing candidates for that position. Literally next week, we're doing interviews. In the interim, the two leads in that program have been doing an excellent job of carrying things forward. Alice Stover is handling all of the planning and planning and policy development for energy efficiency and customer programs, engaging with the CPUC and that sort of thing, and doing a lot of the planning. And then Megan Duran, who I'm sure you all have heard from as well, is handling the implementation team. So they each have teams working under them, and they've been reporting directly to me while we're in the process of hiring to fill that position.
Okay, thank you. It'd be my suggestion or request that on a regular basis at our meetings that there be a very brief written report on, I don't know, consent or just for a board. It doesn't need to be a presentation. God knows our meetings are long enough as they are, but I would like to see on a regular basis, now that we have a budget deep into the seven figures about energy efficiency, which is sort of unique amongst an energy provider of any kind, and certainly I think it's consistent with the mission, but also a departure from the rest of the work that MCE does. I think it'd be a good idea for the board to receive regular reporting on that.
Sorry about that. We do have those reports. In fact, I believe we had one last month. We typically try and do that every 3 meetings. At one point we were doing it every month and got direction from the board that was a little too much. So we alternate with our public affairs updates and our policy team
We can
updates.
bring it back, though, if you want more.
Yeah, no, I sort of explicitly tried to be clear that I don't want additional speaking presentations.
We have a one-page
Actually, it was like the very first thing I thought I said, but I would like...
slid right over that.
I would like a paragraph, an executive summary that anybody who's interested can read and ask questions later. But I for sure don't want to lengthen our meetings, but for sure I would like some, not just for me, but I think for the benefit of the entire board, kind of what is going on with this program. That's all.
We have an excellent one-page summary that is in your packet about every 3 meetings. It's a graphic that shows how our expenditures are going on the commercial front, the residential front, and the agricultural front. So please look for that. I think it's a great way to get all the information in one page, and ask any questions that you have. Let us know if you need more information than that one page.
Any other questions to Dawn? All right, Nathaniel. Welcome to the board. Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. For those of you,
Are you going to introduce yourself? I'm getting a request for information about you from my left.
I am going to, yes, I will. My name is Nathaniel Malcolm, and I'm on the policy and regulatory team at MCE, and I've been tracking the PCIA, or Power Charge Indifference Adjustment, for MCE over the last year or so. And like I said, I wanted to take this opportunity to communicate out some of the developments that we've seen in the proceeding over the last month or so, and just give you an idea of what I'd like to cover in this presentation. I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about the PCIA mechanics, for those of you that are less familiar with the PCIA, and then I'll go into MCE and CalCCA's goals for this proceeding, and then I'll spend the majority of the time talking about the substantive tracks of the PCIA proceeding, including going into CalCCA's proposals for PCIA reform and also the joint utilities PCIA reform proposals. And before I move on too, I wanted to drop sort of two footnotes. The first being, I'm going to repeatedly refer to CalCCA, and the reason for that is that CalCCA has done a really great job representing the CCA movement in California in this proceeding. They submitted the testimony on behalf of MCE and the other CCAs, and they've retained counsel and a team of experts that MCE has worked very closely with in development of this testimony. So it's just been a very great, ideal opportunity for the CCAs to create a unified, strong front before the California Public Utilities Commission and also other stakeholders in this proceeding. And the other note I'd like to make is that, as you all are aware, this is an open proceeding before the California Public Utilities Commission, and it's also in a very active state of litigation at this point. We're in the testimony phase. So because of that, I'm going to keep my presentation at a very high level. And while I welcome your questions, I would ask that we keep the discussion also at a relatively high level, as MCE and CalCCA are actively developing testimony in this proceeding. So with that, by way of a long introduction, going into the PCIA mechanics, as we all know, the PCIA, or Power Charge Indifference Adjustment, is a charge that seeks to hold CCA customers responsible for above-market costs of IOU resources that were procured for those customers before they departed bundled utility service and became CCA customers. And the underlying purpose of the PCIA is to make sure that there is no cost shifting, that the bundled customers are not bearing costs that were attributable to CCA customers, and similarly that CCA customers are not allocated costs that were not incurred on their behalf as well. And an important component of the PCIA is what we know as the market price benchmark. And this is very simply a dollar value that is set by the Commission on an annual basis to estimate what the market price of power is in California, with the purpose of determining what the above-market costs are that are allocated among both bundled and CCA customers. And the way the Commission currently goes about calculating the above-market costs is that the Commission will look at all the costs in the utilities portfolio and compare it against the value of that portfolio as determined by the market price benchmark. And that difference between the cost of the portfolio and the value of the portfolio represents the above-market costs that are passed to bundled customers and CCA customers. But an important distinction to keep in mind is that above-market cost is sort of baked into bundled customers' rates, whereas CCA customers pay their above-market share through a specific line item of the PCIA. And so when we talk about what MCE and CalCCA's proceeding goals on in this proceeding are, it's really about trying to determine how to fairly allocate above-market costs in these portfolios, and being able to know what those costs are, so within a reasonable amount of time, so that for MCE's planning purposes, and also improve the transparency of any methodology that is used to calculate these costs, so that there's reasonable confidence that these numbers are correct. And all of this is really for MCE's purposes, is to really ensure that MCE is in the best possible position to serve its communities and continue to meet and exceed its goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through its energy procurement. So at this point, I'd like to go into the substantive tracks of this proceeding. Early on in the proceeding, the Commission decided to split the PCIA proceeding into two separate yet concurrent tracks. And the first track looks at the question whether CCA care customers, which are our low-income customers, and CCA medical baseline customers should be responsible for their fair share of above-market costs. And wrapped into that analysis is whether bundled customers should be treated consistently with CCA medical baseline and care customers. And it's important to note that currently, under the current rules, CCA care customers in PG&E service territory pay the PCIA and have for a number of years, but medical baseline CCA customers in PG&E's territory have not been allocated their fair share of above-market costs. So in MCE's approach to this track of the proceeding, we've reached out and worked very closely with one of the foremost advocates for the medical baseline community to determine what would be a fair resolution to this track of the proceeding, but also at the same time be sure that we're protecting our most vulnerable customers at the same time. And what this resulted in was a settlement proposal, which MCE signed on to with the Center for Accessible Technology and PG&E and a number of other stakeholders, where we agreed that CCA medical baseline customers would be responsible for their fair share of above market costs, but that in order to protect against increased bills and rate shock, this would be transitioned over 4 years, going up incrementally. And so, as I said, that settlement proposal is before the Commission, and we very likely will get a decision on that sometime in fall of 2018. So moving on to track 2 of this proceeding, which looks at revisions and replacements to the current PCIA. And the overarching sort of issues in this track of the proceeding are looking at ways to increase transparency of the current methodology and any substitute methodology, but also looking at ways to identify and avoid cost shifts from bundled customers to CCA customers and vice versa. And I thought it would be useful before going any deeper into track 2 to give you a sense of where we are in the proceedings, give some procedural context. And as I alluded to earlier, we're in the testimony phase of this proceeding. But what I really would like to point your attention to is that the Commission has remained committed to issuing a proposed decision in this proceeding as early as late July of 2018, which likely means we will get they will vote out a decision in fall of 2018 with implementation of that decision as early as the first quarter of 2019. So this proceeding has moved very quickly and continues to do so. So now I'd like to talk a little bit more about CalCCA's opening testimony in this proceeding. And there are really 3 themes that we covered. The first being this issue of cost shifting that I've mentioned. And one of the things CalCCA wanted to address were some claims by the IOUs over the course of this proceeding of a significant cost shift to bundled customers resulting from the current methodology. And this was problematic for a number of reasons, but in large part these were unverified numbers that they were using to value the portfolio. But also what seems to be clear is that they were based on fairly pessimistic views of the market price for power in California. So and what CalCCA was able to demonstrate was by changing using the same methodology, but changing some of the basic assumptions about how power is valued, and specifically using some of the values that the California Public Utilities Commission uses for planning purposes to value things, that CalCCA was able to demonstrate an almost equal and opposite cost shift to unbundled customers, to CCA customers. And this is not to say that one number is correct and the other is not. It's really more to illustrate that there are a lot of costs that need to be dealt with in the utilities portfolios, and that the issue of valuation is front and center of this proceeding. And this really goes to the near-term fixes to the current PCIA methodology and the long-term market reform proposals that CalCCA put forward. Going one step deeper into the near-term fixes of the PCIA, again, this goes to the issue of valuation. And what we're really talking about is looking at ways to improve that market price benchmark in order to capture more values, more legitimate values than it currently encapsulates. And that includes doing things like capturing both long-term and short-term capacity values, and also recognizing that there's a premium for greenhouse gas-free power, which is not currently within the market price benchmark. And CalCCA also looked at pushing the Commission to have the IOUs do improved forecasting of departing load, incentivizing them to improve their portfolio management practices, to reduce costs at any opportunity for the benefit of both bundled and unbundled customers, to reduce costs for everyone. And also to use the vast amounts of data that have been collected and shared in this proceeding to figure out a way to better forecast what the PCIA might be going forward. And another proposal we put forward that I wanted to call out is relatively simple, but I think it's important, is having a PCIA line item on all customers' bills. I mentioned that all customers are responsible for above market costs to some degree, but only CCA customers have a specific line item on their bill indicating that above market cost. So this would really communicate that the way the utilities manage their portfolios and above market costs are costs that potentially raise rates on all customers. So moving now into the more long-term fixes to market price, to long-term market reform ideas. And these really go to the issue of looking at creative ways of reducing IOU portfolio costs to the extent possible, and also looking at ways to redistribute excess IOU resources, utility resources, to load-serving entities like CCAs who have growing loads and are actively procuring for their customers. And one of the proposals that we put forward was a quarterly IOU portfolio auction, which we presented sort of the shell or the basic methodology of how this would work, and it would take place over a course of 2 years, and there would be quarterly bidding on all IOU resources that are PCIA eligible and that are either greenhouse gas free or renewable. And that not only would this be a way of getting these excess resources, these contracts out of the IOUs and to the CCAs that are procuring, but it would also sort of explicitly create a market price for those resources that could be used to hopefully and potentially more accurately value any residual resources. And then a second long-term proposal CalCCA put forward was this idea of securitization of PCIA eligible utility-owned generation. And really the concept here is looking at a way to dramatically reduce IOU portfolio costs, and in so doing reduce the PCIA and also reduce costs for all customers. And I think this graphic here is a pretty good at illustrating conceptually what one of the things this is looking to do. And how securitization would work, it's the IOUs would issue bonds, and the revenue from those bonds would be used to reduce the revenue requirement for these utility-owned generation resources. And it would move away from the traditional rate recovery scheme where there's a lot of front-loaded rate recovery that peters out over time. This would stabilize the rate recovery, reduce costs, remove costs from the portfolio, and reduce costs for all customers. And now, to tie this all together, I'm going to talk for a few moments about the joint utilities opening testimony. And I'll note that the utilities filed jointly, so PG&E, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric all filed together. And they proposed what is basically two revisions to what you all may remember as the portfolio allocation mechanism. And these reforms came in the form of the green allocation mechanism, and it's now become quickly known as the GAM, and the portfolio monetization mechanism, or PMM. And looking more closely at the GAM, what we can tell from testimony is that this methodology would apply to renewable resources and large hydro resources. And what it would essentially do is it would allocate involuntarily to CCAs resource adequacy, which is that extra amount of procurement that all CCAs need to procure in order to be sure that the lights stay on at any moment of the day, and also unbundled renewable energy credits. And this is problematic for a couple reasons, but mainly this seems like it would have a tremendous effect on CCA's ability to manage their own portfolios and determine what products they offer to their customers. It would take up a huge amount of their procurement, and it would be involuntary. And the costs of this would also be given to CCA customers as well. And it's also notable for MCE is that because we're looking at unbundled renewable energy credits, unbundled RECs, PCC3 products, this runs the risk of going against MCE's integrated resources plan over the next 10 years, which has a 3%, which anticipates a 3% cap on unbundled RECs going forward. And then for the rest of the resources, so we're looking at more conventional resources, we have the portfolio monetization mechanism, which functions very much like the current PCIA. The important distinguishing characteristic is that instead of the market price and above market cost being determined administratively as it is currently through the market price benchmark, it would be trued up annually based on market performance throughout the year, and also actual sales of energy, actual transaction costs. And this very likely means what we saw with the PAM, which is liquidation of excess energy on the short-term, very low-value spot markets. So with that, I want to thank you all very much for bearing with me through PCIA, and I welcome any questions any of you may have.
That was really clear and informative presentation. Any questions? Yeah.
I do. I have a couple questions, real quick, I promise. Number one, can you remind me, what is the current additional charge by percentage, or however we calculate it, that our own customers bear under the PCIA?
The current
initial, how much additional do our customers have to pay of the bill that we send them, or that they have to pay on a monthly basis because of the power charge and difference adjustment? As I recall, at one point it was like 17% or something whopping. Dawn, is it bigger than that? Is it less than that? Where are we?
It's slightly more than that.
More than 17% of every dollar they pay is
It
to the
represents
power
about
charge?
a third of the bill.
Okay. And then have you done, or has anybody, the investor-owned utilities or CalCC or anybody, extrapolated what the practical effect of these different mechanisms would be on the bill? How much more would we have to pay? How much less would they have to pay? And so forth. In other words, I appreciate the sort of philosophical debate, but it would mean more to me and probably be more persuasive with whoever's the decision makers to connect it to hard dollar figures if you can manage it.
It's more macro at this point, and what we're really looking at is total portfolio savings at this point. So one of the things that our experts were able to do was to monetize based on 2017 numbers that came out in the latest era, and based on the proposals that CalCCA put forward, we are looking at that CCA customers are bearing approximately a $400 million cost shift away from bundled customers to CCA customers. But as far as breaking it down precisely to what customer bills would see, or percentages of bills based on any one of these proposals, that will very likely be.
Well, no, I mean, keeping it on a macro level is fine. Like, for example, sorry, this is Sloan Bailey speaking again. That macro impact is persuasive to me. $400 million sounds like a gigantic amount of money, but my understanding is that we don't have a clear path by which the community choice aggregators get out from under it ever, right? And is there any way to extrapolate or to enforce the investor-owned utilities or somebody to say, what is that cost expected to be next year and the year after, and where is the end? Because $400 million a year, year after year, starts to add up to a lot of money. And I would think that, you know, it would be persuasive to say, on a macro level, we should have a macro solution.
That's one thing that we have gone into in this proceeding. I don't want to get into too much detail now, but that one of the opportunities that this proceeding presented was having our experts be able to look at the IOU's portfolios and be able to see what the PCIA will look like going out several years, based on being able to really dig through the portfolios and see what's in these contracts, what are the terms, when are they coming online, when are they going to peter out.
Okay, I mean, but sort of on the same track, under the green allocation, sorry, right, good point, thanks. Under the green allocation mechanism, the third bullet point you have on that slide, on the 8th page there, was allocates costs to the CCAs. Like, how much? This is hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars? I mean,
This is based on PG&E and the other IOU's opening testimony, so we don't know that effect at this point.
So the reason I'm trying not to proselytize, but the reason why I'm belaboring this is, since I've been on the board, the single biggest problem financially that we've had as an organization to struggle underneath is this PCIA, for which we receive no benefit but have to pay year after year after year after year, 17%. Imagine what our revenues and how much less we didn't have to pay an extra 17% every time. So I'm keenly following any effort to try to undermine this thing.
Thank
you. Kevin? Kevin?
Very good, thank you. Kevin Harrell from the City of Larkspur. I want to thank you very much for that presentation, and thank the staff very much for all the effort and energy that they're putting in dealing with this issue. I very much share the concerns expressed by Sloan just a moment ago. I've been on this board now for, I think I'm in my 5th year, and this has been a recurring issue. And when I came on the board, the concern really was focused on the kinds of issues that Sloan was talking about. The PCIA would be a feature of our rates that would diminish and disappear over time. That hasn't happened. And instead, the focus has really been more on, I don't want to say ceding the ground to the IOUs and setting the agenda, but it's been really more focused on methodology for calculating it, and basically responding to their proposals to perpetuate a system that creates some unfairness for CCAs. So I would encourage not to diminish or take away at all from the efforts that you all are engaging in the various strategies that you've outlined in the presentation this evening. But also to keep in mind that fundamental issue that I think faces all CCAs and can threaten or jeopardize the success of the CCA community going forward in the future, which is this perpetual charge that we have to bear on behalf of our customers for energy that we don't get and use and supply. So I'm all in favor of that, and hope staff will continue to keep that theme in mind as we engage in these regulatory processes. I just had a question and along those lines, just to clarify. Going back to your one of your slides, CCA opening testimony track 2 on the themes on cost shifting, just to understand a little bit about those two numbers that you outlined in that first bullet item. The IOUs claim $178 million cost shift to bundled customers. CCA demonstrates $173 million cost shift to unbundled customers. And those calculations are the result of different assumptions about the market. Are those cumulative numbers or do they offset? They're claiming, the IOUs are claiming that, their customers are basically experiencing a detriment of $178 million. We're claiming, based upon a different calculation, $173 million. Are we really in a difference in our position between us and the IOUs of 178 plus 173, so getting maybe close to that 400 million?
No, it's not cumulative. It's
Microphone. Thank you.
it's not cumulative. It's a shift. It does not get to the 400 million.
So we just agree with their calculation and they disagree with our calculation. If you accept their calculation, you get one number. If you accept ours, you get another.
That's more or less the explanation. Okay. And the $400 million number was based.
It's different.
It's different.
Yeah.
It's based on a different year's data, and
right. It's just kind of coincidentally, it's kind of in the same ballpark. So you also said that in explaining this, that there's no necessarily right or wrong in terms of the market assumptions that are built into those calculations. But I got to believe that we do think there's a right or wrong, or else we wouldn't be generating the numbers that we're generating, showing a detriment to our customers.
Yes, I was specifically speaking to that example, that the 173, the 178, that was just illustrative to show how these assumptions can really sway the calculation one way or the other. We definitely do have strong opinions about what that cost shift, what the costs that CCA customers are carrying that they shouldn't be, and that's more towards that $400 million.
Okay. I assumed that was the case. I just want to get that clarified, because we do have confidence in the assumptions that we're using in generating the numbers that we're generating.
We do.
And we are aggressively pressing our case.
We do, yes.
Tom?
Tom Buck, Richmond.
Mike?
Going back to the care and medical baseline customers, it was my recollection that currently these customers who subscribe to MCE pay the same as PG&E rates. Is that right?
They have the same care rates and the same
right.
medical baseline.
So in this proposed settlement, if they're now going to pay PCIA on MCE rates, are their rates under MCE going to exceed their rates under PG&E?
No, it would more.
Microphone. Thank you.
It would more bring them into parity, and the way to think about it is that the rate, the care discount and the medical baseline discount are the same, but the care and medical baseline bundled customers are paying above market costs in their rates, whereas the medical baseline customers are not paying the PCIA, so it's bringing them down another notch, so to speak. And they're getting a double, it'd be an added incentive.
I don't understand, but I'm not going to ask you to explain it tonight. At some point, I'd like to see, how the numbers are going to change from what they are now. And then the second part of that is, you talked about the investor-owned utilities collaborating to present a united, whatever you call it, a pitch. Are they not violating some kind of antitrust laws or something by doing this? By getting together and setting rates and
They're all, I can't speak too much to this, but there are non-disclosure agreements in place among the utilities, my understanding, so there's no sharing of that data. It would take them down this path, but I'm not in a position to really speak to that.
I'd like to get some kind of legal take on that, it just doesn't, it seems like, they're sort of acting in unison to do what they're doing. We can do it because we're a public agency. But I didn't know you could do that in the private sector.
Good point, Tom. So any other questions for Nathaniel? Can't see if there's anybody in Concord, so I'm assuming none. Great.
No, I got a question.
Okay, great.
Eddie Bursan, Concord. I'd like to back up Tom Butt's point. I'm very upset if this is, it does seem like it's either a RICO or some kind of collusion is going on here. Something's not right. And I don't know, but since we are multiple counties, whether this is a request for an investigation that should go to the Attorney General. This stinks. And I'd like our legal guys and Dawn to sit down and see whether we should make a bunch of noise on this. And maybe we can drive some of our colleagues in the Senate and the Assembly for cover.
I think it's a great suggestion. Dawn, did you want to comment on that?
I just agree, it's a great suggestion, we'll certainly look into that.
Right,
Thank
and
you very much.
there's a group within the California Attorney General's office that specifically focuses on energy issues, so there are
And I
various
should also
vehicles.
point out that since the Attorney General's office is in an election year, and since the PG&E and the power people are not exactly election material, that we better strike fast because we'll lose this after November.
Yeah, excellent point. All right, any other comments or questions? Okay, so this brings us to board member and staff members, and there's just one thing I wanted to raise. Don, when you started, you mentioned the MCE board survey. And did you want to have people's names on it? Because the last question is to please provide your preferred contact method. And I'm assuming you might want to have a name associated with it, although there's no place for a name on the form. So would you like everybody to put their name on this survey form?
I defer to Darlene.
Yes, you
on
would.
this.
Yes, please, because we want to do what you
All
want
right,
us to
so
do. in
fill out the
terms of
survey and
contact.
add your name. Okay, very good.
Concord's already turned their forms in and without names.
Uh-oh,
Or some were without names and some were with.
uh-oh.
That's all right.
Well, we'll do cleanup on that. All right, any other board or staff matters before we adjourn? Seeing none? Thanks, everybody, we're adjourned.